Good evening, everybody. Good evening, members, officers, and members of the public. Welcome to Tendring District Council Planning Committee on Tuesday, the 16th of January 2024. This committee meeting is also going out live and it is also being recorded. And the link to the live stream can be found on the Council's website, www.tendringdc.gov.uk/live meetings. For the purpose of the recording, I will introduce everyone. I'm Councillor Maria Fowler, Chairman of the Planning Committee, and I will introduce members of the committee separately. Councillor Maurice Alexander.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor Mark Cousins.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor Richard Everett.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor Linda McWilliams.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor Gina Placey.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor Adrian Smith.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor John White.
Good evening, Chairman.
And Councillor Anne Wiggins.
Good evening, Chairman.
Thank you, members. The Council officers assisting us this evening are from Committee Services, Bethany Jones, Maddie Agar and Hattie Dawson-Drazitic. From Planning Services, Planning Officer Alison Pope, Planning Manager John Pateman-G and Director of Planning Gary Guyver, and our Planning Solicitor Joanne Fisher. Changes to the agenda running order, there are none. Each application will be presented by the officer, followed by public speaking. The applicant or agent, any members of the public who have already asked to speak for or against the application, then will be followed by a speaker from the town or parish council, and then finally the ward councillor. Members of the committee will then have a chance to question the officer. Once all the questions have been answered, the committee will then debate the application. When all the points are discussed, finally, I shall ask if we have a resolution and call for a proposer and a seconder, and we shall then vote in accordance with the normal rules. Item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence and substitutions, please, Bethany.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Sudra with Councillor Smith replacing her.
Thank you, Bethany. Item 2, minutes of the last planning committee, which was held on the Tuesday, the 19th of December. Have you all had a look at the minutes, members who were here? Do I have a proposer? Councillor Alexander, seconded by Councillor Placey. Could we have a show of hands, please? Those minutes are approved. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any? I have one. Agenda item 6, A2, 23/01375/4, Parkston Railway Club. I did not take part in the site visit this morning, though I wish to declare a personal interest. The applicant, 2 of the trustees of Nest, the landowner, and several of those objecting to this application are all known to me. They are either friends, colleagues, or acquaintances. So I will therefore withdraw from the committee for this item, and the committee vice chairman, Councillor White, will take the chair. Item 4, questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38. Are there any, Bethany?
Thank you, Chair. No, there are none.
Thank you. Item 5, which is our first application, A1 23/01540/4 and 23/01539/LBC, Maud's Court, Long Lane, Tendring. And to present this application this evening, our Planning Officer, Alison Pope. Over to you, Alison.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. These first applications, a full application and a listed building consent application, were referred to the Planning Committee as their departure from the development plan, in that the application falls outside of the tendering settlement development boundary. The proposal is for the conversion of the existing coach house into a 2-bedroom dwelling with parking and amenity space. The application site lies partly within the tendering conservation area. The site also lies within the setting of the Grade 2 listed tendering hall, likely having previously formed part of the tendering hall estate and is curtilage listed. The hall residence lies to the south, while the dwelling of Suffolk Barn is immediately to the west. I can show you that on here. That's Suffolk Barn, the hall is to the south here, and Hall Farmhouse, as you can see and is noted on here, lies to the north. Further west along the lane, agricultural buildings have been converted into offices, and these form a courtyard and associated parking. The aerial view shows the application site in context at the edge of the village, with the village hall just here, and the church also in view at the southeast there. This shows the front of the coach house when viewed from Long Lane. And this is an area again of the coach house, and to the left where the proposed parking will be. This shows the coach house on the right-hand side as you enter Long Lane. And this photo is looking west, so you can see Suffolk Barn, which is the large barn here, and the side of the coach house with the courtyard, parking and offices at the end of the lane. This is the south side of Long Lane, opposite the coach house, where the garden boundary and mature trees of Tendring Hall is seen. I will go on to show you the design of the proposed dwelling, but first I will discuss the merits of the application. The coach house is curtilage listed, as the structure predates July 1948 and was within the curtilage of the listed Tendring Hall. Principally, policy SPL2 of the local plan confirms that outside the settlement development boundaries, the council will consider any planning application in relation to the pattern and scales of growth promoted through the settlement hierarchy in policy SPL1 and any other relevant policies in the plan. Tendring is categorised as a smaller rural settlement. It is considered that these smaller rural settlements are the least sustainable. However, these villages are still under pressure to grow, and some small-scale development, which is sympathetic to the rural and often historic character of the settlement, might help younger people to continue to live in the area, keep services viable, and help bring back the balance to an ageing population. The application site lies a distance of approximately 90 metres from the edge of the settlement development boundary of Tendring, and it's within walking distance of public transport links, the church, as you've just seen, the village hall, and the local primary school. The proposed conversion of the coach house will maintain the form and design of the building while reusing as many of the original materials as possible. New windows and doors will be inserted, and work to the roof is required. The roof will be upgraded using the original tiles on new hand-cut timbers, and the old timbers will also be reinstated. The current roof and structure contains evidence of having been re-roofed or worked on previously, and there are new sawn wooden timbers which have been added on top of the old wooden beams. Modern felt, wooden braces and new wooden roof ridge are also evident in the photos that have been submitted with the application. Place Services were consulted for their advice. They offer no objections, confirming the proposed conversion of the existing coach house, and they consider it to preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area, ensures the long-term preservation of a listed building, and those elements of the setting which contribute to the significance of Tendring Hall as a designated heritage asset. No development to the building is to take place until the applicant has secured an implementation of programme for historic building and associated analysis work in accordance with a written scheme of investigation, which will allow proper investigation and recording of the building's historic significance. This programme of historic recording will be secured by condition, and a brief detailing the requirements of the programme can be obtained from Place Services. One tree, a conifer, which is currently in the garden of Hall Farmhouse, is proposed to be removed. It is outside of the conservation area and is not protected by a tree preservation order. This slide shows the proposed layout of the site, where 2 car parking spaces are providing that meets the current parking standards. The Highway Authority confirmed the proposal is acceptable. The proposed garden provides ample space with a condition to be imposed to secure hard and soft landscaping. Due to the distance from the existing residential properties, there is considered no significant impact on neighbouring residential amenities. The existing floor plan is here, and the building is currently used as a workshop and for storage. This is the proposed floor plan, which complies with the nationally described space standards for a 2-bedroom, 4-person, single-storey dwelling. And these are the existing dwellings, which you may have seen today, existing elevations, which you'll have seen today on your site visit. And these are the proposed elevations, showing the position of the new windows and doors. There have been no objections to the proposals, and it would conserve the heritage assets, the conservation area and Grade 2 listed tendering hall. The high-level policy conflict in regard to the location of the site outside the defined settlement development boundary is not so fundamental that it outweighs the benefits of the scheme. In this case, the conservation of heritage assets. The development would not result in any material harm in terms of scale, layout and design, heritage impact, residential amenities or highway safety, and is acceptable in all other regards. A unilateral undertaking has now been completed for the RAMS financial contribution, and therefore the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. There are no speakers on this item, so I will go straight to the members of the committee for questions for the officer. And on the list already, Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alison, for a robust report. In the beginning of that, did I hear you correctly when I heard that a part of this application was in the conservation area? Which part of the application is within the conservation area? Is it the actual building itself or the land surrounding it?
Yes, the building itself and the front of the site. The proposed garden is not in the conservation area, and the part of the building, I've got it here, part of the building, which is currently the garages with the slate piece of roof, which if I go there, the bit with the slate roof and the 2 garage doors together on this plan, that's not in the conservation area, but the part of the building with the tiled roof, the part of the building with the tiled roof and the front of the site is within the conservation area.
So the tree that's to be removed, the conifer, is outside of the conservation area. Is that correct?
Sorry, I misheard you there.
There is a conifer that's to be removed. Is that outside of the conservation area, please?
Thank you. Yes, the conifer is outside the conservation area, yes.
Chair, I have something I'd like to add to the consultations at the end. Can I do that at the end, or do you want me to do that now?
Oh, it's entirely up to you, Councillor Alexander. If you wish to do it now, I have no objection. Okay.
Right. The retention of the first tree to our right of the building and the removal of the tree to the second. Is there any way within can we put a condition on that we asked that they, within the landscaping scheme, that they replace that removed tree with another tree of similar ilk? Because there's no two ways about it, it's a magnificent tree.
if I can come in on that one, if I may. So we have a planning condition at the end of the report, and actually it just gives me a quick opportunity to say one thing as well about the conditions, which is that in respect of your recommendation on page 15, it refers to the planning conditions under paragraph 8.2. It should also insert the word and 8.3 as well, because there's two sets of conditions. So just for the avoidance of doubt and for the record, the recommendation picks up on both sets of conditions, one for the listed building and one for the planning. Anyway, back to the question. In respect of condition 12, you have a landscape condition that requires details to be agreed of soft, e.g. trees and hedges and so on, and hard landscaping to be agreed. We haven't specifically said anything in there about replacement of trees or new trees. We're looking for the applicant to propose a scheme of landscaping. The question I would have, and I don't know the answer to this, is simply that if you were to leave the conifer in, how would that affect the soakaways that are being proposed within the garden? And equally, if you were to put a replacement tree anywhere within that garden, how would that affect both the building and the drainage proposal that goes with this scheme? I don't know the answer to those two questions. However, at this moment in time, from a planning position, that tree could disappear tomorrow and there is no control we have over it. It's currently within an existing garden for a property, and this is effectively just changing the boundaries of that garden around. So from a planning point of view, it is not something I would recommend you pursue further, but obviously that's for debate.
Councillor Alexander, do you wish to come back?
I think that's worthy for debate. I need to absorb all that.
That's fine, thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm afraid mine was exactly the same point that Councillor Alexander made. This tree in question, I'm afraid I don't agree with our tree officer. He just says it doesn't merit retention. It's a magnificent Caucasian fir, and it's still growing. This year, I can see there's another 18 inches on the top of it. It's a superb tree, and I think we need, if it's got to come out, it is very close to the building, but if it's got to come out, then we should specify definitely that we actually replant another tree somewhere in the grounds. The grounds are quite sufficient to take another tree. I'm just so disappointed that this magnificent tree is recommended to come out of the scheme. So I'm mindful of what the planning manager just said, but I was going to propose that we definitely made it a firm condition to replace it if it's got to come out. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. Have any of our officers actually been inside the existing building? And if so, have they seen the construction of the wall that would be the end gable wall of the left-hand half of the building, please?
Thank you. No, I haven't been in the building. I've relied on the photographs that have been provided within the statement and the heritage statement. So I haven't seen that particular wall, no.
Are we aware of the construction of this building and how load-bearing walls are contained within the building? Because I would argue that the coach house is probably two separate buildings. One, the main part, probably originally, and then the second part added to it. That's a surmise. I'm not legally qualified in any of this stuff. but that's how I would guess it was, and that the original building, then the divide between the two is a gable end wall. If that is the case, then obviously the plans involve demolishing that gable end wall to make the open plan that is provided for in the new plan drawings. That being the case, have we consulted with the amenity societies on this application, because it involves demolition of a principal elevation of the building?
Thank you. That particular wall is not considered a principal elevation of the building, and we haven't consulted any amenity societies. It's not one of our statutory consultees for a application of this nature. For a Grade 2 listed building, we consult our heritage advisors at Place Services at Essex County Council, and they have provided advice in that regard. If it was a Grade 1 or Grade 2 star listed building, we would then consult English Heritage, but we haven't been required to do that. It's a Grade 2 curtilage listed building, and the condition that we will impose on any grant of planning permission asks for the applicant or the developer to provide a schedule of historic recording of the building and any changes that they make, so that that is recorded, and the use of any of those materials that may be taken down as that part of the building, if that is necessary, will be reused within the building.
I take it you're aware of the arrangements for handling heritage applications made by the Secretary of State in his direction, which doesn't say that it's only 2-star listed buildings. It says it's all 2 listed buildings, and that the amenity societies should be consulted in certain circumstances, and that's all laid down in this document. I'm concerned that we haven't actually consulted a statutory consultee, and that would be a bit of a serious omission, but I'll leave more about that for the debate.
Can I just come in on that point? So I have a copy of the direction, and the councillor will be aware that I corresponded on this point earlier today. Although I have to admit, I didn't know which part of the building was being referred to, so I was guessing about well, actually, my guess was maybe it was the windows, because they could be deemed to be part demolition if you're taking out wall and therefore arguing to be a new window opening, which in effect is partial demolition. And I was concentrating on the point about the amenities society, which is about the notification. So didn't pick up on the internal wall. The internal wall, you're right, it is 2 buildings. One is an extension to the other. The internal wall is therefore, or was originally, likely to have been the external wall, and therefore load bearing and therefore functional. Taking it out, we don't know if it's partly taking out or entirely taking out in the information I have before me. Accordingly, we do, in my opinion, and forgive me not wanting to undermine my officer here, but just clarifying that we're now specifically talking about the wall internally, which we weren't aware of before, and I don't have evidence in front of me that I can see what that is. I would say that we should, if we do make any decision today, we can make a provisional decision, but we would still need to carry out a consultation exercise with, at the very least, the amenities society. The point on Historic England is any works of any Grade 1 or 2 star, or relevant works to any Grade 2. Relevant works is demolition of principal building, it's not that. Alteration of any principal building which compromise or includes principal external wall, it's not that, because it's no longer external. wall. But when it comes to internal, when you take out things like staircases and load wearing floor structures, it could be that. So, for the avoidance of doubt and to ensure a risk-free decision, we would look to consult on both the Amenity Society and Historic England for 21 days. And I apologise that that was not picked up earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, that's very helpful indeed.
Are there any further questions for the officer? I'm sorry, but I must go back to that tree. It was an absolutely stunning tree. There is no doubt about that. And I have read the report from our tree and landscape officer that the conifer is reasonably well formed and a healthy specimen. But it does not merit retention or formal legal protection by means of a TPO, tree preservation order. Do we know for sure that the tree is going to be axed?
Thank you. In the statement that's been submitted with the application, it is highlighted that it will be removed as part of the proposal, yes.
Thank you, Alison. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Chair. Did I hear Councillor White right that he'd made a formal proposal on this tree? If so, I'm more than happy to second that.
No, I think you misheard.
With respect, I believe that what Councillor White said in his opening statement was that he wanted to make this proposal. Did I mishear that?
We'll just get some clarification on that. Is that what you said, Councillor White?
Yeah, I don't want to see the tree down, but it's pretty obvious from what our planning manager has told us it could be filled tomorrow. But my proposal was that we should put a condition in that if the tree were to be removed, and that would be a crying shame, but if the tree were to be removed, at least we should get another replacement of, and I'm not talking about putting another little whip in, I'm putting an established tree in somewhere in that garden to replace it. But it's a crying shame for it to come out. The sort of roots that we get on that tree is a ball of root rather than a wandering root. And so although it's relatively close to the building, I would have liked to have seen it being kept. But if they can befill it tomorrow if they should so wish, then I think we ought to at least have a replacement for it.
Thank you for clarifying that, Councillor White. Councillor Alexander, it was a condition, yes? Was that what you were referring to? A condition along within the proposal?
Yes, Chair. And
Thank
I endorse exactly what Councillor White has said.
Okay. So
we do not want to whip.
No.
If it's a condition, it needs to be one of
I'm
mature
quite in agreement.
age.
Mr. Pateman G, were you trying to get my attention?
Sorry, I was just debating. Sorry, forgive me. I was obviously my job is to try and help, and I was just trying to find any other way in my head that might assist you further. The trouble is, and I think I may have said this before, when it comes to trees, the planning system at this current time isn't very well equipped to help, which is a crying shame, I will say. But I'm dealing with a tree that's got no protection whatsoever. It's in a current garden and could be taken out by the current owner, literally any minute now, if they wanted to. And if I'm honest, I'm surprised they haven't before they put the application in. That's the sad fact of it. However, I was just looking to see if you put a replacement tree, looking at the block plan I've got in front of me, I've got two soakaways effectively either side of the garden. And I'm just not sure about the practicality of a large tree. And not to say a small tree or something that doesn't have a significant root system couldn't be achieved and couldn't be put forward as part of the landscaping scheme you have conditioned under number 12. And we could probably enhance that very slightly by saying, shall as a minimum include a tree, for us to then judge the appropriateness of the tree and location. I think there's still a risk there because we're not entirely sure of the drainage understanding of the site, but it's something you might want to consider. That is not because you're trying to save a tree, I will emphasise. It might be because you're looking at the enhancement of biodiversity interests that you are a duty to pursue, and you feel that in this case, this would be an enhancement you wish to pursue.
Thank you, Mr. Peyton G. If there are no further questions for the officer, we will now go into debate. Councillor Everett.
Thank you. I used to live in a coach house that was a conversion very similar to this in Stevenage, in Old Town. And I'm always for well-planned, well-thought-through applications that bring into use or retain the use of listed buildings. So I'm very keen to allow this application to proceed. I do have a issue obviously about the technical issues around amenity societies, but in some ways that's a technical issue. I think it's a well thought through and good addition to the housing stock, and I would want to propose approval of this application for those reasons. But with the suggestion that Mr. Pateman G made that we defer the implementation of it for time to give the amenity societies time to comment should they wish to do so. I would also like to include, and I need sort of guidance really from the rest of the committee on what they think they want to do about the tree, because in my view there are two options, one of which is we say the tree should be retained, but with the caveat obviously that it isn't protected, so there would be a problem, or that we try to get some form of replacement for that tree. But happy to listen to the debate, but with the proposal at the beginning of that I made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Everett. I do have a proposal from Councillor Everett. Councillor Placey.
I'm quite happy to second that. As regards to the tree, difficult one, isn't it? It is a lovely tree, but as has been said, it's a tree that can be felled as we're speaking, actually. If they would plant another tree if it was possible, but I'm not sure that we could actually enforce that, maybe suggest that, but I'm happy to second the proposal as Councillor Everett has said.
Thank you, Councillor Placey. So I have a proposer, Councillor Everett, and a seconder, Councillor Placey, to approve the applications with the 21 days for the consultation for the Amenity Society and to replace the tree if it's felled. Okay, may I have a show of hands, please, for approval? That is unanimous. That application is approved. We will now have a 5-minute break before we go to the next application, and then Councillor White will be in the chair.
Right, colleagues, we'll make a start on the second application tonight. It is for, if I got the right page up, it is for planning application number 23/01375 full at the Parkston Railway Club, Hamilton Street, Parkston, Harwich. And before we actually go straight to the officer, I'm going to ask the planning manager if he'd just introduce this one.
Thank you. Just in respect of the proposal before you, just before this meeting we had an update over the ownership of the site. Obviously, we have to ensure that the application form is correct. It normally has a certificate of ownership so that we ensure that all relevant owners are notified of the application. Most often we see what's called certificate A because the owner and the applicant are the same. Sometimes we have certificate B, which says that they're looking at land. So if I wanted to put an application in to do something with this building, even though it's nothing to do with me, I'd be serving a certificate B on the council. And there are others, which include C and D, when you don't know all the owners. In this case, it's been drawn to our attention that there may be owners unknown and maybe owners that haven't been served with notice. Therefore, we need to provide the time for that to happen. So that the current applicant is, I understand, looking at serving a certificate C in order to reconcile that point. So whatever recommendation we move forward today with either seeking to approve, refuse or what have you, we have to allow a time for that that ownership notification to take place, generally around 21 days, before we can release that decision correctly. So just to point out that it's not an issue that you need to concern yourselves with because we've picked it up, but it does mean that any decision you make today may not be released for a period of at least 3 weeks while the ownership issue is resolved. Whether that you are looking at refusal or approval or what have you, unfortunately it's a pickup so late in the day that we can't do anything other than wait for that time period to go for that notification to take place. I hope that's clear. If it isn't, please ask me as we go through.
Thank you very much, John. Right, again for this application, Alison Pope is going to introduce it to us, so over to you, Alison.
Thank you, Councillor White. This second application seeks planning permission to change the use of part of the Parkston Railway Club car park to site 4 containers for use by the charity Nest for storage purposes. The application site, Parkston Railway Club, is located to the north of Parkston Village, adjacent to the Parkston Bypass and Parkston Quay to the north, and residential properties to the south. The site lies outside of the settlement development boundary and within flood zones 2 and 3. The aerial view here shows the application site in context. The site of Parkston Railway Club consists of a brick-built social club building to the west of the site and associated car parking areas to the north and east of the building. Access to the Parkston Welfare Park and Community Centre is located on the boundary on the eastern side of the application site. This shows the front of the club building from Hamilton Street, and this shows the vehicular access from Hamilton Street as well. This shows the rear of the club car park and with access to the welfare park and community centre through the gates, which are, I can point to them, there and here. And this photo is a closer look at that eastern boundary of the car park with the entrance to the welfare park and community centre. This photo shows an old container on the site and a newly placed container, which does not benefit currently from planning permission. And this is another photo of the rear of the car park. This shows the proposed layout of the containers and the removal of the old container, which is shown as a dotted red outline. One container, as you saw in the photo, has been placed on the site already, and this will be repositioned to comply with the proposed plan here. This is the floor plan and the size of the container. And this shows the size of the proposed containers, of which there will be 4. The proposal is for the change of use of the part of the car park of the Parkston Railway Club to site 4 containers for storage. Although the site is outside of the defined development boundary, the principle of development is acceptable in this case, as weight is attached to the established use of the site as a community facility, which is well placed and easily accessible to the local towns of Parkston, Harwich and Dovercourt. The applicant runs a registered charity called NEST, North Essex Support Team, which helps families and individuals in the local community. The 4 storage containers will be used to facilitate this charity work. However, consideration that if no longer needed by the charity, the containers may become a more commercial use, as storage in general is the described development on the application. There would be limited views of the containers from Hamilton Road and from the bypass to the north. The simple form and scale of the containers have a functional appearance. However, located within the car park, the visual appearance of these containers will have some effect on the very localised semi-public space. The both proposed and potential use of storage activity would be positive set against the neutral appearance of the containers. In terms of noise and disturbance, given the type of storage, will not be significantly different to that of the existing site use. Taking into account the proposal as submitted, in the statement of use it is considered reasonable and necessary to impose a condition on the grant of planning permission to restrict the hours of use from 8 in the morning till 5 in the evening, Monday to Saturday, so as to protect the amenity of neighbouring residential properties, and this avoids any potential conflict with the existing use of the Parkston Railway Club. The access and movements associated with the use of the containers has been set out in the submitted statement of use. Volunteers will access the site at 8:30 a.m. and then later in the day, with occasional visitors to the site during the day to meet volunteers for particular needs. On a Thursday between 11 and 2, the Baby Bank and Hygiene Bank are also operated from the containers, or will also be operated from the containers, and allows approximately 30 families to be provided with items they need. The Essex parking standards confirm that the use of the Parkston Railway Club requires 1 parking space per 25 metres of floor space. The building is approximately 600 square metres, and therefore 24 car parking spaces are necessary. Following the siting of the containers, ample space will remain for car parking of at least 24 cars. It is noted that Autoprint, the printing business located opposite Parkston Railway Club in Hamilton Street, have offered car parking provision on their premises by way of an overspill car park. It is not possible to consider this additional car parking provision as part of the planning application. The site does not fall within the red line area of the application site and would not therefore be relevant to the development permitted. It would be possible to secure the parking provision at Autoprint only via a Section 106 legal agreement. However, as noted in the paragraph, sufficient car parking provision is already retained at the Parkston Railway Club, and so this is not necessary. The site also lies within flood zones 2 and 3. The sequential and exception tests are not relevant here, as the proposal is for a change of use of the land. A flood risk assessment was submitted with the proposal, and the Environment Agency did not object to the proposal. A planning condition is, however, necessary and reasonable on the grant of planning permission, requiring the 4 containers to be anchored down to mitigate hazard during a flood. The assessment of the proposed change of use for the siting of storage containers at the Parkston Railway Club reflects several considerations. Having regard to the above and what I've said today, and in the absence of any objections from any statutory consultees, the containers are unlikely to cause significant visual harm or landscape impacts, and minimal impact to residential amenity. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions outlined in 8.2 in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, colleagues, it's a chance for any questions you might have. Yes, we have a list of speakers, but I was going to have questions to the officer on her report. And we've got a list of speakers. In fact, every item has got a list, so we can take it that way. Yep, we'll do it the order that's been suggested. So in that case, we'll do the speakers first. And it starts with the applicant, Mr. Les Nicholl. Mr. Nicholl, if you'd like to come forward and get your microphone. And once you've got the microphone live, once you pull the button, you have three minutes, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Les Nicholl and I'm speaking on behalf of North Essex Support Team Nest. My background is 54 years working for Essex Fire and Rescue Service. I am the founder and lead on Nest. My role since retirement from active firefighting in 2006 has been working directly in the community, now as a safeguarding officer. It was seeing the everyday struggles of the vulnerable, the elderly, the sick and disadvantaged families struggling with poverty that led me to starting Nest. Initially, may I place on record our gratitude to the officers within the TDC Planning Department who've been extremely helpful throughout this application. We have for some time been looking for a practical, permanent, affordable and safe local base. If given a choice, we would love to rent a clean, dry warehouse, but sadly the availability is poor and the cost is prohibitive. We were beyond pleased when Parkston Railway Club offered us space in their large car park. This application is vital to the future of Nest, so as you can imagine, we've done everything possible to make sure the application meets TDC's planning requirements. I believe that we've addressed the concerns that have been raised. Nest's activity on the site will not create any parking issues within Parkston. Autoprint, as you said earlier, operating opposite the site, have kindly offered to allow Parkston Railway Club to use their car park as an overspill, meaning off-street parking availability will not be affected. Likewise, as a member of Essex Fire and Rescue Service, the ability of emergency services to respond is always at the forefront of my thoughts. The space we would take up would not compromise emergency fire, police or ambulance vehicles from accessing the site in large numbers. The collections to and from the site will be minimal, days only, and there will be no noise or pollution issues. Nest is a tiny charity. We have a small battered van for deliveries, which 2 of our volunteers take out on a Monday and Friday morning. We will occasionally be delivering furniture donations or emergency pickups during the week and at weekends. Finally, I am aware that Councillor Jo Henderson is speaking against our application and that she is to speak after me. I have no knowledge of the concerns she'll be raising. As I believe we've addressed all the legitimate concerns raised by residents living in Parkston, I would like to make the following observations regarding any possible impact on the residents living within Councillor Henderson's All Saints Ward. The site is not visible from All Saints Ward. The site cannot be heard from All Saints Ward. The nearest property to the site within All Saints Ward is a 20-minute walk from our prospective base. I do not believe there will be any parking implications for All Saints Ward. I hope I've addressed any concerns that the committee may have. I am, of course, happy to answer questions and I very much appreciate your time to listen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't take questions to yourself, so we'll move on. A member of the public speaking in favour of the application. I think there was quite a list wanted to speak, but I believe it's Ms. Sarah Sturts, if she is here. Welcome. Once you've got yourself set, I see the microphone is still on, so get yourself settled and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I would like to start by saying I'm in full support of the planning application for Nest. I would like to start with the issue of parking. Having the containers on site would not affect parking at the club. The main functions are generally Friday and Saturday evenings. The majority of people leave their cars at home as they have come out for a celebration, which 9 times out of 10 involves alcohol. Autoprint, situated opposite the club, have very kindly said, that we can use their car park as an overspill. I believe you have a signed copy of this letter. The club is open 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. during the week. Wednesday night is pool night. Generally, the away team have one car or turn up by taxi. All of the lorry drivers that use the car park Monday to Friday are members of the club. Wednesday morning is Bernardo's Stay and Play, which is free for families. Bingo on Sunday is not massive, and most attendees walk as they live in the village. Wrestling has attended the club twice, maximum visitors of 100. The containers would have no impact on traffic in the village. The Port Road is the closest access point, and the containers are only visited when needed. They would definitely not be an eyesore, as the car park is not visible from the Port Road. Also, the containers would be painted the same colours. The first thing visitors see is the site of the old petrol station. Children's safety has never been a concern or issue for the club. No children have ever played in the car park. The Bowls Club has football training on a regular basis, and I feel the safety of the children should be down to the adults running the football training. If ever it became an issue, which I'm sure it won't, it would be addressed. I myself have been fully aware of Nest for years and all the good that has been done. I myself, last year, Christmas time, witnessed how hard and needed Les and the Nest team are needed in the community. No one knows what is round the corner in life these days. The Bowls Club is also running as a charity for the community with well-needed events as well. It's just so unfortunate that in true community spirit they both can't get along. Nest is 100% needed in the community for everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And now we have a member of the public speaking against the application, Mr. Eric Brumhill, I think. If you could come forward, sir. Again, I see the microphone is still on, so once you're settled, you've got 3 minutes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee. Let me introduce myself. My name is Eric Bramhill. I will try to keep myself to planning matters only, but I believe I need to make a brief statement regarding the history of how I became part owner of the Railway Club. I've been a member of the Parks and Railway Club since 1976. I was asked by committee to become a trustee at least before 1990. I joined Ron Greenfield and Greg Chung as trustees and became signatories of the deeds. In 2006-2007, I found that the then secretary had not paid the Friendly Society, and subsequently the club had become an unincorporated association, and therefore the protection of trustees' liability had been removed. Eventually, after much pushing of committee, we managed to register the club under the current registration of the Cooperative and Community Societies Act 2014, with new rules not requiring trustees. But after the meeting to discuss once these new rules had taken place, we didn't know what the situation was, who should go down as owner, and we didn't want to get into a situation where if it was a secretary or a chairman, then we were constantly having to change the title deeds. So subsequently, the then the third trustee, Mr. Greg Chung, had disappeared. He'd moved out to Colchester and could not be contacted. The other trustee and myself said, now we'd got back limited status to the club, we were quite happy to continue as trustees. Hold it in trust. We couldn't do it as trustees because the rules didn't have trustees. I'm very surprised at the Director of Planning's decision to recommend the approval for this application. Is my name on the land registry as part owner of the Parks and Railway Club? Is Greg Chung and Ron Greenfield on the land of the registry of the Parks and Railway Club? Is Jeanette Sands' name on the land registry as part owner of the Railway Club? I dispute that. Is the Parkston Railway Club Limited name on the land registry as part owner of the Railway Club? I dispute that. I won't discuss parking at the moment because that's an issue that other members, other people talk about. I've got no problem at all with Nest apart from the fact that they told me that they had to move in before the end of the year or they would have to close down. But subsequently, the owner of their present site has said that there's no need for them to move. The PRC is a limited company. The registration shows that the company status is registered, cancellation notice issued.
Begin to wind up, Mr. Bramwell, please.
Yep, okay. The club has held hasn't held rules for 2 years. The Parkston Railway Committee, knowing I am the owner, hasn't come forward to me and talked. I've talked once to the secretary, who said to me that she hadn't seen any agreement. I said, I want to see the agreement between Nest, and she said she hadn't seen one. As far as she knew, it was just a 5-year contract for £3,000 a year. The rest of the thing, I cannot understand why your TDC officers have left it so late to say suddenly there's an issue on ownership.
Right, thank you, Mr. Bramhill. That completes your little slot. And now call on Councillor Tanya Ferguson, who is Ramsey and Parkston councillor, as well as being Harwich councillor, I understand. So she's speaking on, according to my list, she's speaking on behalf of the parish council. Is that not the case?
I'm not speaking on behalf of Harwich Town Council. Thank you very much, Chair. It is with a slight heavy heart that I speak in opposition of this application, because I've always been a supporter of Nest through the years and have great respect for Les. I'm here on behalf of Parkston Ramsey Parish Council, and have been asked to represent the council and the 151 people that signed the petition against the application. I lived in Parkston for many, many years, and parking in general is hideous. I was never really able to park my car, and any excess parking in Parkston does become a problem, whatever time of day or night. However, I think we banged on about parking quite enough. I just feel that the application is difficult, to say the least, in terms of what we've heard from Mr. Bramwell. And I did speak to Alison about this, and it just seems a little counterintuitive that if the owner of the site says this can't happen, I guess this can't happen. So it seems a bit odd that we're all sitting here talking about this issue, but that's another matter, and I guess the legalities around that are not exactly clear. I just wanted to say, in my humble opinion, the site that Nest are currently on is probably much more sensible. There are better transport links to that site, and whilst I know that's not a planning application issue, it feels like it's an emotive issue. It's easier to access by the train and the bus park for all those 30 families that use the baby and, sorry if I've forgotten the words, of the drop-in that they have on a Thursday. And I can only reiterate the feelings of the parish council. A big discussion was had, and the parish council were in majority against the planning application. I don't have anything else to say. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for that. And now, finally, Councillor Henderson, who called it in, I think possibly as an adjacent ward member, but also on behalf of the local member. Councillor Henderson, if you'd like to come forward. I should add, Joe, but you're well aware of the fact you get 5 minutes. So.
Lovely, thank you, Chairman. I am aware of the valuable work that Nest does in the Harwich and North Essex community, but I believe it is irrelevant to the planning application requesting that 4 42-foot shipping containers are placed in the car park to the rear of the Railway Club in Parkston. These 4 containers would be in addition to one already located in the car park. Before highlighting my concerns with the planning application, I would like to say that I have been assured that the registered title deed owner of the land, Mr. Eric Bramhill, has categorically stated his objection to this application and has communicated this to the lead case officer, Miss Alison Pope. My concerns are as follows. The most significant and most negative impact will be on available parking. Parkston has a major problem with parking now. It's on both sides of the streets and spaces are always at a premium. As the streets are narrow in the first place, this seriously affects the flow of traffic through Parkston. I believe that the need for the Autoprint car park to be used as an overspill car park for the Railway Club is confirmation that a parking issue currently exists and that the Railway Club has had to take measures to increase parking availability. Clearly, the placing of 4 42-foot shipping containers alongside the existing one in the Railway Club car park would further reduce the availability of parking spaces. I understand that the agreement to park in the Autoprint car park is contained within an informal handwritten letter and does not give this provision to park in a formal long-term or contractual agreement. There are 2 community resources affected by this application and availability of parking, the Railway Club and the Parkston Welfare Training Ground and Centre. The Railway Club serves local people and those that drive in from outside of Parkston. It's used for a range of activities, a members bar with pool tables, and it has a pool league, Sunday bingo, function hall for 250 plus persons to celebrate birthdays, weddings, wakes. It holds calendar events such as firework nights in the car park and a disco, Halloween parties, Christmas disco, pantomimes, other events as have been stated, the SOS wrestling matches, school proms, and within the premises is their Railway Cafe. The cafe website states that, and I quote, the cafe initially served for lorry drivers in the evening. However, with the onset of COVID, we saw an increase of patrons from Parkston, Harwich, and even distant towns like Clacton and Colchester. Clearly, many individuals come to the Railway Club from a wide area and all need to park their cars and lorries safely and off-road. No provision in the recommendation to the committee mentions lorry parking. The Welfare Training Ground and Community Centre is also used for a range of community activities. It's the training ground for the Under-10s Colchester League, the Under-12s Colchester League, which includes the Parkston Welfare Football Club. Other clubs within there are the Community Kitchen, Tea and Chat, Aid in You, where a range of recycled mobility aids are provided free of charge to the community. They also have the recycling of drink cans at the site, which provides much needed funding for the welfare park. This, which is owned by the Village of Parkston, this covers their annual insurances and open space annual inspections. Other community initiatives include their free annual Christmas party, which is sponsored by local businesses. There has been a right-of-way and parking when accessing the former Bowls Club, now the Parkston Welfare Training Ground and Centre. This right-of-way access and parking has been in existence unchallenged for well over 20 years. Satisfactory and safe access for mobility equipment and vehicles is essential for the elderly. Also for parents parking to drop off and pick up their children who attend football practice, and for anyone else attending the warm space, tea and chat club or the community kitchen lunch club. Concerning parking, I would like to draw attention to the CCTV images which have been submitted to TDC as part of the objection to this planning application. It clearly shows how the car park is currently very well used by both cars and lorries. The second important impact of this application is upon the safety. The car park is accessible to all children living in the Parkston area and indeed the public 24/7. It's an open ground and shipping containers could be seen as enticing the inquisitive, unsupervised children playing out. This may not be a planning application issue, but we've all got a moral and duty of care to keep children safe. Children playing on or around these containers can risk injury, whilst unlit areas between and to the rear of the containers, particularly in the darkest months, has the potential to pose a safety and security risk to anyone of any age using or crossing the car park. The third impact concerns location. Parkston is a residential community village, not an industrial area. It coexists with the port across the other side of the boundary road. The parking up of port shipping containers behind secure fencing is a port requirement, irrespective of their contents.
Can you wind up, Councillor?
Yeah, my last bit. I would like to highlight the flood risk mitigation report that recommends that the containers be anchored down to the existing concrete apron. The Railway Club car park is not concrete, it is compacted gravel. And finally, what about the voices of the Parkston residents, the households and people who actually live in the village? The petition represents a cross-section of Parkston, and there's also 15 letters of objection that were submitted to TDC. I would hope that all the points made will be given your full and serious consideration. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee.
Thank you very much. Before I go to questions, I'm going to ask the officers if they've got any additional points they'd like to raise too.
Thank you. Obviously, a range of points of view expressed there, and if it's helpful to members, I just want to clarify a few planning points that were raised. Just returning to ownership for a moment, the matter of that there may be owners not notified by this proposal were raised, as I understand it, only last week. We contacted the applicant and they are making arrangements as we've required them to do so. So on that basis, from a planning point of view, we are there to deal with the notification of the ownership, not police it in any other way. In terms of ownership, if ultimately there are other owners involved and if ultimately they have a say over what goes on this land, that is a private legal matter for them to deal with. And if indeed it means that this development doesn't go ahead, again, a private legal matter for them to deal with. Planning permission can be given, but it does not necessarily have any influence over trespass or matters of ownership. That is a separate legal regime. Like I said, I could put an application to demolish this building, but just because I might get it doesn't mean it could go ahead. I wouldn't get it anyway, it's listed, but that's not the point. Ultimately, we've explained within our report about parking and how we find it satisfactory as set out in respect of the authorised use of the site. That is a matter of debate I appreciate. I will state that the site is currently unrestricted in terms of planning, in terms of activity of use in association with that club. But how owners may or may not restrict it, again, is a private legal matter for them to resolve or deal with. This is a proposal for storage. I want to clarify that the applicant is known as Nest. They are a charity, but ultimately planning deals with the land, not the person or organisation, and therefore this hasn't, as it currently is provided to us, stated that it will only be for charitable use. It is a storage use, so it may be any owner or any person may wish to store in these containers. Obviously, said permission, if it was granted, we are recommending conditions to control that potential harm in respect of the development for storage. Lastly, just to say that the merits of the proposal should be considered on their individual basis, and alternatives is not a material consideration that I would recommend you consider further. You are dealing with this proposal as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I've already started to get a list of speakers for questions. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. My question is really to Mr. Pateman-G. Let me preface it with some knowledge that I have of another situation elsewhere from here, which is that I used to be involved with the Railway Club here at Clacton. And the Railway Club at Clacton, the building was a very separate, distinct operation from the car park. And the car park was owned by Network Rail. Now, if that is the case in this case, then I suspect that might cause a problem, because if they haven't been notified, they might wish to put objections into this application. So the fact that actually somebody hasn't been notified is related potentially to this application, because they might wish to object. So what is the situation here if we then make a decision here tonight and another owner of the parking facility actually then comes forward?
Sorry, I probably should have added that should any further different issues be raised, then we would obviously return it to committee.
Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. Can we have clarification? How many of these containers actually will be on the site? How many, please?
Thank you, Councillor. There will be 4 containers on the site. The container that you may have seen on the site today, an old green container tucked into one corner, will be removed, and there will be a condition on a grant of planning permission to have that removed within 3 months.
So, there will be 4 containers, which will also be the one that we saw today, which is already cited.
That is correct, but that will need to be repositioned to comply with the layout plan.
There was also concerns raised about, and I believe somebody mentioned how, please forgive me, I don't know who that was, about lorries parking also in that car park. Should they be tractors? That's fine. But should they be a lorry with a container on its back? The logistics of its sizes changes completely. Do we have knowledge that there are lorries parked there, and how many?
We can't give you numbers, but ultimately the current use of that area is unrestricted, so therefore any size vehicle can currently park in that area.
Mr. Pateman-G, I do apologise. Would you mind just repeating that, please? I didn't quite catch what you said.
In planning terms, I don't know if the owners has any particular restrictions themselves of who or may park in their own car park, but in planning terms, I'm not aware of any planning restriction currently imposed on that site that restricts the size, number of vehicles. So therefore, you could have the largest lorry possible park in there overnight for any time. You could have several cars park in there overnight anytime. We have no current planning restriction to that effect on that site.
Apologise for that senior moment. Right, the next thing is that I have the proposed site layout plan. looking at this on the bus and going off down to the site, it bears really very little resemblance of what we saw when we arrived there. There were gates, for example. I think there were 3 in total, which are not on this plan, nor the correct sizing to how this is laid out. This has raised concerns to me. Naturally, any charity, you want to do your very best to ensure that it works, because charities are so needed in this day and age. But I would have liked to have seen a better laid out plan with more accurate measurements. Now, is there such a plan in existence?
The plan we have here is the plan submitted as part of the application that we are considering.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Everett coming back, and then I'll go to Councillor Placey afterwards.
Thank you. To follow on from the points just made, when we went to the site visit this morning, I would argue that the site is not represented by what we see on the plan here. And in fact, I think it makes quite a difference as to whether the application would be successful or not, because it looks as though it's tight getting those containers in on the existing plan, and I'm not sure that the existing plan actually bears realistic scrutiny. Because the orientation of the existing container looks different on the ground to how it is portrayed on here. The corner in there is different to how it is portrayed on this plan. There was access alongside the container into another area behind that, interestingly, when you look up on the local plan, is designated as safeguarded open space and looked as though it was not being used as open space. The access into the area that is designated open space, where there was what I would like to be a croquet lawn, but I'm sure is used for other reasons, is not on here either. So it begs the question whether we can make a decision on incomplete information in front of us, because I can't see how you would I'm not an Arctic driver, so maybe you could, but how you would actually get an Arctic in there and then turn it round again. So I think the layout is severely affected by the fact that we don't have the right information in front of us. And as a result, I would like to suggest that we should defer this until we get appropriate information within front of us.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Head of Planning for comments on that.
So this might be not something you may appreciate, but actually this is more than they're required to provide us in respect of a plan. The plan you have before us is adequate for the purposes of determination of a planning application. It was submitted prior to our implemented local validation list, which was only implemented on the 2nd of January this year. So we have to deal with this as a submission without a local validation list, which means we're only held by national requirements of validation. On that basis, this is above and beyond in respect of the details that need to be provided by law. They don't have to provide the access points to other sites. They just need to literally locate where these containers are going to go. And I hate to say it, they could probably just reduce this plan to literally that area if necessary, and it would still qualify. As long as we have a red line location plan in general terms, it would be sufficient for the purposes of dealing with this application. If the containers, in terms of siting on this plan, prove to be false and they can't implement the plan, that's their risk. But ultimately, it is to scale and it is to the understanding that it is correct in validation terms. I appreciate that's unhelpful, but that's the best I can give you as an answer.
Thank you for that. Yes, it is, but thank you anyway. Which then takes me to the substance of it, I suppose. Irrespective of of what's in front of us, I have question marks how vehicles are going to turn around in that space, whatever that space might or might not be. Especially as a lot of the people that have spoken tonight have referred to the fact that we have lorries being overnight in here, some of them with trailers, some without. I think there is an issue there of safety regarding access to the to my croquet lawn. And I think there's access issues full stop to do with the cramped nature of the application, or the application causing a cramped nature to that yard. I think I'll leave it there, actually.
Thank you. Councillor Placey.
Yeah, Councillor Everett has covered quite a few of the issues that I have with this. That it's a shame that we can't enforce clear access to the other facilities that are obviously the only access is through the car park. I do wonder how it sits that there's spaces for 24 cars when we know that lorries park there as well. That obviously reduces the number of cars. And again, I'll reiterate what Councillor Everett said. This plan doesn't reflect the site that we saw and the way that the containers are going to be positioned.
Right. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. Just to make sure that I got this correct, are you saying with Councillor Everett's suggestion of maybe to defer this until, is this thing on? Yes. To defer this until a more detailed plan, that the plan before us is acceptable, although it doesn't show any of the gates or entrances to the other sides. And, well, just if we can just answer that bit first, please.
Right. So I'm in this position of telling you that the plan is acceptable, but not telling you that it may be an acceptable proposal. So that is your judgment, not mine. Ultimately, we have a recommendation before you, but you may be considering various aspects as your debate evolves in respect of safety and supervisional space, design, appearance, layout, turning. You know, you're developing that argument, so I'll let you continue that debate. And if I can assist later, please do ask.
By our own admission, we have agreed that this is not a straightforward application in any way, shape or form. And because of that very issue, in order that we can find a middle playing field within the application itself, wouldn't it be beneficial if we had before us a more accurate layout plan so we could see where the containers are going to go in their final resting place, and how it's going to affect the entrance or the exits to what appears to be behind quite a busy and bustling little community centre. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, I'll probably get shot down, but as far as I'm concerned, we've heard this many times before. We are considering what we've got in front of us. And if the proposal were to go through or even get thrown out, it's going to be dependent on not on planning matters, but on actually who owns it or not. So the mere fact that we've got a drawing showing 4 containers, and mustn't lose sight, it includes the removal of that container full of asbestos, which, if we were minded to grant it, I would like to see as the first condition. Nothing starts on that site until that container's been removed in the interests of safety. So I don't know whether John wants to add anything, but I would guide you to say, we've got an application in front of us. We should consider that application. If it gets approved on the layout like it's shown, then the applicant will have to construct it on the way it's shown. But we keep on bringing up different thoughts about it, but we must consider what we've got in front of us tonight. Councillor Smith wants to.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the containers now. If I'm right, then children will be dropped off there to go and play football. Is that correct? So, I mean, there was an access to what looked like a football pitch, so I assume that children get dropped off there.
Thank you. I don't know the complete arrangements, but yes, the park where the access is along the eastern boundary is to the Welfare Park and Community Centre, where I understand there are the youth football teams that play, yes, on that park.
If the parents are dropping off, you know, when the children are leaving the vehicles, there's a possibility that they'll run behind the containers. And at night time, we've agreed there's no lighting going in. So you've got children that may come out from behind containers. So there is a risk there, huge risk, I would suggest.
Sorry, sometimes as officers we're trying to work out if this is a matter of debate or whether it's a question, and ultimately we don't have a lighting proposal. I don't know of any other existing lighting arrangements, unfortunately. I've not seen the site, but in terms of lighting, there's nothing proposed as lighting. So the assumption is that it is dark when it's dark in this location. What you make of that in terms of your debate is for you to discuss.
Part of a safety perspective, then there's a possibility we could have children running out from behind containers. I don't know whether we've got a duty to make sure that that is enclosed so that we don't have that as an issue.
It's not the proposal before you, so the layout plan at this moment in time does appear to demonstrate that you can go in between the containers night and day.
Okay, thank you.
And certainly we saw some of us this morning that the lighting, there is an absolutely massive lighting tower on the dock side looking right into this. So one assumes the dock side will be permanently lit, but it doesn't stop the proposal to have some side lighting to get to the play area. It's a worrying thing, I agree with you. Councillor Everett.
Thank you. I think one of the things that concerns me is that we are always being told correctly that we have to go on the information in front of us. This application does not give us enough to go on, in my view, to make a decision. And I suspect from what some other members of the committee have said that there are a few that would agree with me on that. So we have really 2 options. One is we refuse it, full stop. And the other one is that we defer it for discussion with officers to see whether it can be improved in the lines of what has been said by members around this table. I haven't come to a firm conclusion as to which one of those is right yet, and obviously there's the other possibility that we could approve it as well. So I think there's a large amount of debate to go on, but I pick up the point that if children going into that area get behind the containers, etc., so that implies that perhaps there ought to be some sort of sighting boundary around it, fencing or shielding of some sort. I'm not convinced that the layout as it currently exists allows for safe movement of lorries on that site. So I have lots of questions really, and I still don't think we've got enough information in front of us to be able to make a decision. So I'm going to propose that we defer this decision, giving the officers the chance to refine in line with the comments that have been made by committee members and any more that might come after this, if we want to make this work in the future. So at the moment I'm going to suggest deferral, and that is my proposal.
If I may, in respect of what to refine, how do we refine the proposal? The proposal is a static design of a container and 4 of them placed on a site. I don't have any remit beyond that as the proposal is. I can request details of enclosure to cut these off, but I would imagine that causes practical and functional issues with regard to the containers themselves, but I don't have that. I could request lighting details potentially, but will that resolve to member satisfaction the possibility of safety? I'm not sure. I would need perhaps more guidance on what definitions or definements I would need to discuss with the applicant to be of use in this manner. I am struggling to find, beyond what I've got in front of me, what I could ask to improve. They are very much a practical or utilitarian thing that's being asked to be put on here permanently.
In which case, if we can't define that, then, and I take advice from other members, then perhaps we should refuse it.
I don't propose to take the vote yet, but do I have a seconder for the idea of deferment? Councillor Alexander, right?
Speak on that, if I may.
Do you wish to speak at this time?
Yeah, I want to speak on this, yeah. Why I'm seconding it. One is because by our own fruition, we have agreed that this is in many ways not a normal application that's before us, that we would see it and judge it upon its merits. This is difficult. We have to try and find a way and navigate through this so that each and every one of us, Chair, each part of this process is satisfied. It is equally as hard for this planning committee, with what we have before us, to make such a decision clearly and coherently. And it's pushing me into making a declaration, if it goes to either approval or refusal at this point, of abstaining, because I can't do that, because what I see here is not what I saw on the site visit this morning. It differs greatly. We know now that there is movement of lorries. We don't know anything about this, but it's been agreed that these are taking place, and whether or not they're allowed to use. That's not debatable. The fact is that we're bringing in other issues of safety and all manner of decisions. It's a great pity that the officers in their wisdom could not just make a delegated decision. It certainly would have made our life a lot easier. So that is why I'm seconding in this, to give everyone a fair chance to see and to bring this to a final conclusion.
Thank you. All I'll say to the other councillors, I've got Councillor Smith down to speak. But now will be the time where, if you're not happy with it, that we draw up a list, if it goes to deferment, on what sort of things that we want the officers to look at for us in particular. So, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I think that that's one of the things we need to check, that that there is a safety issue, that we need to make sure that children aren't going to be running in and out of the containers. I don't think that we want to see any accidents happen there. There's an access at the bottom where one of the containers was going to go. When we were there, it looked like that would almost be covered up. So I don't know who has access. There was a van in there while we were there. I don't know whose that is. I think those are two things that I think are quite important. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to agree with that. I mean, I think there was sort of, we observed and looked potentially that the containers need to be shown as a block almost, or certainly, you know, drawn up together, because there was discussion about the potential for children to fall down between them, etc., clambering on them. But I must admit, I can't actually follow a reason for refusal would be necessarily fencing these off, because quite clearly children and Arctic lorries may be parking up at night, don't really mix very well in a dark car park anyway, so whether these containers are there or not, I think there's a certain amount of safety issue with what's sitting at the back already, because you know, those don't link together anyway. So it may be that we want to see a better scheme with maybe some illumination in there, and some kind of designated access to, you know, this community centre at the bottom, because if we know that it's now being used for lorries moving around with, you know, young people maybe sort of early evening when it's getting dusk, I think that's a safety issue, and I can't actually see necessarily a justification for insisting on fencing around the containers, because you've already got other issues that may be difficult there as well. And I was just going to make one comment on the condition that was on about the asbestos there, because not only is it sheets of asbestos, but it appeared to be bags of broken up asbestos. So I think there's a more pressing issue than maybe a planning application down the road.
Not really, because I actually agree with what my colleague is saying here at this present time. So that's the issues that we sort of do have in trying to make a decision here, which is very difficult. I just hope John can bring it forward.
There's a thin line between the scheme in front of you being judged on its individual merits and redesigning the proposal. And I will say it, I think we've steered into possible redesign if we're going to go away and try and defer it, because we're looking at a different scheme than the one is before you. If the one before you fails to demonstrate that to me, that's the point you need to debate. Does this fail to demonstrate? And I'm going to give you a list that you might want to consider further, given what I've listened to in this debate. This is not to influence you, this is just a matter of trying to siver out what are the planning issues versus redesign and other issues. Your position here is that you're looking at the permanent placement of storage containers for general storage use in a car park. That car park is unrestricted at this time. There may well be lorries there all night long. I've seen pictures that show me that, but ultimately it could be anything that could be stored on there as parking, as a car park. But it is also a semi-public space, and perhaps you're not dealing with highway issues, you're dealing with amenity issues in respect of that use of space that has multiple uses and interests. So ultimately, where we have containers that are acceptable in some locations, often for a temporary period of need, in this context, does this result in a good environment? Does it enhance the environment? Does it retain the safety of the environment? You know, does this result in unsupervised spaces? Can those spaces be conditioned to be mitigated? Yes or no, but it's not the proposal before us. Does this erode the use of that environment in its interactions with the amenities of the neighbouring uses? So it's not necessarily a parking issue per se, it is a semi-public space that has multiple contributions to make on site and adjoining. And you might therefore wish to look further at section 12 of the NPPF in terms of good functional design points, as well as your local plan policy, SPL3, that pulls out some of these issues I think you might be struggling with. But that may help inform your debate further.
Have anybody else on my list wishing to speak? In view of what Mr. Pateman G has just told us, does the proposer wish to go ahead? Okay, Councillor Placey first.
A little confused because the proposal is to cite 4 containers for storage, and I'm sure we were told that this would be part of, if it were to be approved, this would be part of the approval. But you're saying that it doesn't have to be this, or this. No, sorry, this is where I'm confused. So if it were to be approved, this would be the approved plan, which is what we're all saying is wrong.
We did look at, because we know this was raised on site, and we did look at aerial photographs and other maps to compare with the approved plan. I appreciate what may be seen on site, but when you put them two together on a satellite image and look at the plan, it all looks about right, unfortunately. But there may be some, small amount of give here and there of something, but ultimately, the locations of the containers will have to be to scale to the boundaries as shown. If ultimately the boundaries are shown incorrectly because they've just taken ordnance survey data rather than actually measured it, then that might be their risk. But from what we can see on the ordnance survey, we haven't got a measurement for every single site. We have to rely on the ordnance survey data that we've got for the majority of things when we plot sites and everything else. But there are occasions where site boundaries have shifted over time that haven't been picked up on ordnance survey, and ultimately that's their risk. But as far as we can see, looking at the satellite and stuff that we've got, because if the vegetation is overgrown, trying to define where the actual line in the boundary is not always the easiest thing to do. But as a just general look at this, that seems fairly close to us. I appreciate it doesn't show accesses to other sites on here, but they don't have to. But ultimately it's close enough that we have got enough sufficient, in our opinion, to fairly determine the application, given we've all been on site as well.
I hear what you say, but there's, I don't think I can add any more, can I, to what's been said. There's a glaring error on one bit of it where the 2 containers go against the established container, but
Thank you. Mr. Pateman G pointed us to SPL3. And I've just been reading SPL3 while we've been discussing all of this. And what stands out to me big time is that there are issues within SPL3, and I won't read it all out to you because we'll be here all night if I do. There are aspects where this application does not meet the requirements of SPL3. So we have, if we choose to take it that way, the ability to refuse this on SPL3, in my view. I would like not to have to do that, but I'm also aware of the fact that officers have to live with whatever we decide to do. And while we would perhaps like to try and make it possible, we can't redesign it. And we're not here as designers, and perhaps the opportunity should actually go for the applicant to go and talk to a designer who knows what they're doing about how they could use this site appropriately so it might get planning permission. Now, my question to you, really, Mr. Pateman-G, is from the technical point of view, is it better for us to refuse the application and then let the applicant come back with a later application, thought through, etc., taking into mind what we've just said, or is it easier for us to defer and allow conversation to happen?
Okay, let me ask you a question then. Ultimately, if I have to go back to the applicant and say, right, we went to committee, and if they've not been here, but if we went to committee and members want you to do the following, what would I be asking them to do? And I don't know. So far, though, I do get the impression that there are a number of issues that you are not keen on, and I'm be honest with you, I'm not convinced that you'll still be not keen on if we resolve them in any other way or rearrange the site slightly. I think there are still outstanding issues that you may be looking at in any event. I can't influence you though, that's not my job. But I can only say to you that if I'm going to, if you were to have to talk to the applicant and say, right, what you need to do to change this scheme without actually changing the scheme, what is there for them to actually alter or provide you with more information on? You know, if they had to do an extra wildlife survey, fair enough. We go around, we wait for them to complete that task, come back, great, no bats have been found, or what have you. We haven't got a set list here, and I'm not being very clear on that. I don't know if my colleagues over there can help me any further with this, but that's, if I was to try and say, which, I can't tell you which is better, that's not my role. But if I go away with it, you're more than happy to defer it. That's your option. That's absolutely your judgment. But I need to know what I'm or my colleague are going to go talk to the applicant and say, right, what we need is more information on X. What we need is something else. What is it that I need?
I think that's wise guidance for my own. Forget that I'm sitting in the chair tonight, but for my own guidance, I think we're talking about a charity anyhow. I think there is more in deferring the item than throwing it out. So it's got to be resubmitted and recosted and various other things. I think possibly if we can get a list now of the things that we'd like. One of the points of discussion this morning was whether the containers should be all blocked together instead of separated. That, I would suggest, is one way. There's rather a lot of wasted space in between the containers and behind the containers. As long as the containers are accessible from the front, we could save several square meters, I would suggest, if they went together. So that's one subject that we could think of that could bring it back. The other item is the question of safety for the children, getting across to the play area. And I can't see the answer to that one, if I'm really honest, because children being children, if you put them a pathway through, they won't use it. But it is another problem. Surely there must be some other items which you're holding back on at the present moment that you think a deferment would give us a chance to have a look at. Yes, Councillor Cousins.
Well, I think my biggest issue is the layout of the containers. And although we're sort of suggesting this is all in the layout as it should be, but I mean, on site, and one of the reasons perhaps that we think it looks like a totally different site is the orientation of the container that's already on site. I think that actually might be a better layout, and maybe two pairs done like that up against the side fence, once the container of asbestos that I think is an urgent thing should be being removed, two pairs of containers stuck the same orientation as the existing one against the wall with maybe a space to operate to go in and out of the two ends so you actually separate them against that side would then mean that you could actually have marked spaces butting up to the side of the two containers that against the fence, could make better use of the car park, the parking spaces, and make it better for these lorries that turn up at night, apparently. But I think that would be my biggest issue, is a better layout for the containers, which doesn't create these nasty little sort of places that people can hide, etc. And I think that would be the biggest thing on that part of it. I mean, the issues over parking, etc., and all of those things that have been brought forward is a different matter. But I think the key to it is how the containers are going to be laid out on the site and getting that existing one out of the way, and that would make a lot of space.
Further points that anybody wish to raise? If not, in Councillor Smith.
Sorry, I'd just like to confirm. So we're not worried about the safety. We can't say no on safety issues. Sorry, I've got three. So if I just do all three, and then you can just, if that's all right. So we're not worried about the safety. We're not worried about lorries and the lack of parking that may be a part of that. And we're not worried about blocking the entrance at the end, because if they do, then that will be down to the applicant to remove the containers, which presumably would have to be down to whoever the owner is to ask them to remove that, and then that would be a private issue, not a council one. Is that correct?
Right, in order. Safety. We're very worried about safety, and you are considering the point that is this creating an antisocial and opportunity for crime in respect of unsupervised spaces being created by these containers. So that is one thing. Ultimately, at night, will people want to be behind these containers and they can jump out on people? I don't know. These are aspects that you might want to be considering, because this does provide, at this moment, the layout provided at the moment, you could argue, does have unsupervised spaces within it, if that's one side of the argument you wish to take. Will an alternative layout, sorry, going off slightly, but would an alternative layout solve that problem but create another one of maintenance and landlocking and intrude into the turning manoeuvring space? I don't know, but maybe it's a case of we ask the applicant if there's an alternative available. If there's not an alternative layout available, then ultimately you've got to deal with this on its merits. In terms of the access to alternative uses, I don't know what their rights of access as a private concern are. Whether it's a public, it's not going to be a public right of access, but whatever established right of way has been established, it's a material consideration which you may decide to give weight to. But as far as I know, these are not blocking that right. In terms of the use of the site, it is unrestricted. So if someone wishes to park an articulated lorry in the middle of this site and the owners are happy with that, of course, in this case, there may be some conflict with owners, but that's not a planning issue. But if they are happy with that, it's, in planning terms, is unrestricted, and that can happen right now. So that safety issue in that context is already there, or could be already there. Does that help? Have I covered it?
So you asked about if it was to be refused, what would we use as a method to refuse, and you're saying
if we deferred this item, what would I go away and talk to the applicant about? That was the list that I think we were dealing with. At the moment on my list for that circumstance, I've got to ask the applicant about the access to neighbouring uses and how that would be maintained as a safe access. And I've also got, would a redesign of the container layout be a consideration? At the moment, they're the two things I've got if this was a deferral. I will ask how the applicant feels that safe access to the neighbouring uses that are accessed from this site will be maintained. And their answer might be, it will be, and that might be all I get. They might give me more than that, I don't know.
Councillor Placey.
I almost forgot actually, we get so caught up in cars and car parking and lorries. Pedestrian access, public transport, people will be coming to collect things. I think I did ask where the nearest bus stop is a walk away, but then that means we've got to make sure that pedestrian access is safe. Would that come into it? I'm not sure.
My colleague can probably show you where the bus stop is, but ultimately that will be beyond the site and along the roads and pathways to get there. Are we?
It's Una Road, I think. Una Road.
Yeah, it's in Una Road. Yes.
So a bit of a walk from where the containers are. Quite a bit of a walk. I'm not sure, I'm asking, because we're talking about cars and we're talking about car parking and dangers with cars and all the rest of it, and for people accessing the other facilities, but what about people that are actually coming on foot, as it were, from the bus stop that are accessing, yeah?
If someone's leaving a bus and coming up the road to get to the club or indeed the various users via this site, at the moment they have to walk through this open area. How does a container alter that footpath, and does it affect and does it change the amenity of it? Does it cause a safety issue with that current routing? That's your debate in whether you think it does.
Thank you, Chair. I always feel at this stage we sometimes run into repetition, and that's how I feel that we're going right now. We came in here tonight, I came in here tonight, armed with my agenda, after thoroughly reading it and doing little bits of chicken scratch all over it and comments and etc. with a recommendation that the planning committee is recommended to grant planning permission. But then we're offered this piece of paper with the ownership of the land occupied is not straightforward, and therefore, and it goes on, which was explained by John in his first part. So with all this in mind, you can see why we're getting confused here and why it's becoming so much more difficult for us to make a decision. Surely nobody wants Chair to stop a charity from functioning. That's the last thing we want to do. But we need to make sure everybody is fairly treated within the system, and I think that's what we're trying to do. I seconded the proposal by my colleague here, young Richard, and I stand by that decision because I think it's the right one. Because Councillor Cousins has also brought up an idea which is excellent. Each one of these containers is, I just looked it up here, is 8 foot across. You can't just have them stacked. You never get the doors open, so they've got to be lee on either side, so they'll be about 10 foot round. If you put them across, that's a 40-foot span we're looking at, where what Councillor Cousins suggested would have reduced that literally down to 22 and would have made such a big difference. So there is leeway for discussion if we're prepared to do it. And we understand the regulations and how they affect the officer team and planning officer team and how that's going to come down to us. But you can't expect us to make a decision on what is before us here because there's insufficient evidence for us to make a decision upon, where there are so many alternatives that could satisfy everybody. And then we can work in peace and harmony amongst ourselves. So my seconding stands.
Right, I think I agree. Yes, John.
Can I, to try and help conclude matters, can I suggest that ultimately the proposer has offered it to be deferred, it has been seconded, and as I understand the reasons for that is to enable the officers to ask the applicant about access to neighbouring uses and what may be possible to ensure that they are maintained as a safe route. And secondly, to consider any layout redesign considerations, if they are available, that may enhance the scheme. And we leave it as simple as that. This does also allow the ownership matter to resolve itself naturally. And of course, if there are additional, that's not actually, that is a valid reason to delay in terms that there may be further reasons or issues raised by that notification period. And then we can return to you to present the item as it may be the same or it may be as amended.
That was just what I was going to ask the proposer and seconder. Are you happy with that? And if you are, we'll go ahead and vote on the proposal to defer.
I'm happy with that.
Concur.
Right. Oh, I am advised that since I was last chairman, we do everything now by a show of hands. So that being the case, you know what the suggestion is, that we defer with those items. Those in favour of deferring, please show. That is unanimous, I think. So this particular item, we haven't put a time on it, John. It will have to be left. Yes. Right. In that case, I'm going to, in the absence of the real chairman, I'm going to wind this meeting up. There's nothing else to be added, so thank you all. And thank you all very... Yes, yes, please. Yeah.
Bring Maria back and then she can...
Well,